is good, everybody? Welcome back to Cross Country Bank Angler. Today I've got a video here talking about my top 5 lures for multi-species bank fishing in the fall. So, in my opinion, at least in my experience of fishing over the last few years, I think that the fall, bank fishing in the fall, can be one of the tougher times of years to consistently catch fish, especially in comparison to the spring or the summer. Only the winter, I would really say, is tougher. And you know, it's a time of transition. The fall is a time of transition, not only for humans but also for fish. So you know, they are feeling those changes in air temp. You know, those cooler nights start coming in, then the days start getting cooler. You know, those cold fronts come in, and there's also a phenomenon called fall turnover that takes place this time of year. That's when the temperature and oxygen gradient that is often established in the summer in a lot of ponds and lakes gets disrupted. So the fish kind of orient themselves on that temperature gradient in the thermocline, is what it's called, in the summer. But once that kind of starts going away, the water gets stirred up. There's water that comes up from the bottom, cooler water that comes up. The water can get stained, and it can affect the ability of the fish to feed and the willingness of the fish to feed. So there are some factors here that make the fish a little less predictable. You know, they tend to be a little more scattered. They're not always going to be on that same cover or structure that you were finding fish on in the summer. And some of that stuff is going away. Some of that aquatic vegetation is starting to die back slowly but surely. Now, it is still a factor in the fall, and I'm going to be trying to target it in the fall when it's there. But there's a lot of change going on, and it can make the fishing a little bit tougher. But you can have some really great days in the fall, you know, in between some of those tough days that inevitably happen. And I've actually caught some of my biggest largemouth bass in particular in the late fall on the first type of lure that I'm going to talk about today, and that is going to be a spinnerbait. So I've made multiple videos about spinnerbaits, or I made multiple videos about different variations on a spinnerbait. So I've made a video on inline spinners, which actually predates the safety pin style spinnerbait like this. And I also made videos about jig spinners or beetle spins. Here's one right here, an amazing lure that you should just always have in your box, in my opinion, guys, is this little thing right here, especially in the fall. But some things to pay attention to when you're using a spinnerbait this time of year is that, one, the type that spinner that I'm going to use is going to be different in the early fall versus the late fall. So I'm going to be more inclined in the early fall, when there's more vegetation around and the water is warmer, to fish one like this. So you can see the double willow blades on this. Got a swimbait trailer. It's just like a 3/8 ounce spinnerbait. And that double willow, you know, it's better for a faster retrieve, which is typically more effective when the water is warmer. And those willow blades come through weeds. Those thinner blades will come through the weeds a little bit easier than, say, something like this wider turtleback blade. The other thing to be aware of, guys, is that there's a lot of smaller fish, you know, young of the year fish swimming around in this time of year. You know, a lot of different panfish species have spawned. You know, sunfish, perch, bluegill, crappie, they've all spawned now, and there's young of the year schools of them all over the place. Not to mention the shad themselves, minnows, they've all spawned. So there's a lot of just tiny bait fish that predators like bass or crappie will start keying up on. And that means that sometimes throwing something like this, we'll see how the blade on this is quite small, is actually going to be advantageous for you guys, because you're mimicking the size of the bait fish a little bit better when you throw that smaller blade. And you know, once the water does start to cool down a little bit, I tend to stick with something with a wider blade shape like this. This is an Oklahoma or a turtleback style blade, and that's going to be able to spin at a much slower retrieve. You know, you can really crawl that thing along in comparison to something like this big willow blade. So that's one that I always keep on, guys, especially if I'm going after bigger game fish. You know, this is not just a bass, you know, a largemouth bass where you can catch, you know, pike or muskie or pickerel, stripers. It's an inshore species. We'll hit this, guys, you know, striped bass. So, and you know, you can really expand the species that you target if you go down to something this small, guys. Just about any type of fish will hit one of these downsized beetle spins. So be willing to adjust your gear and the size of your lure according to whatever you're targeting. All right, so moving on, guys. So I've said it already that sometimes the fall is a tough time of year to fish, and I'm going to want to go with something kind of a little more natural, a little more finesse on those tough days. But since it's a little tougher, in my opinion, to figure out where the fish are until you start catching them, I still want to be able to cover water. And on days like that, I'm going to go with some type of Finesse paddle tail swim bait. Now you can kind of combine these. Here's one, guys, a very small one that I was using just the other day. It's like a 2-inch. This is a Bass Pro Shops Speed Shad. It's basically a Bass Pro Shops version of a Kitech Swing Impact. You can see I got a very natural kind of bait fish color there, just kind of a gray smoke color. And you know, you can combine these with a spinner. Sometimes, you know, an underspin jig head, or you know, I could put this swim bait and replace the little grub that's on here with swim bait. So if you're around like a lot of bait fish and you want your lure to stand out a little bit more, there's more of a stain to the water or wind in the water, I would go with that. But more often than not, I'm fishing this by itself because I want natural, I want finesse. The fish aren't biting very well. So this one really saved the day recently. Actually, I was on a little canoe trip with my dad, and we didn't really catch anything throwing bigger stuff, but I tied this on at the end and caught a few, you know, some sunfish and a decent sized fall fish as well. And you know, you don't have to go that small. You know, if you're targeting some bigger game fish, you know, that little 2-inch one, you could catch all sorts of panfish, crappie, things like that on those. But you know, you can go a little bigger. Here's one. This is more like a 2 3/4 inch. This is a local brand, actually. I've got this on a 1/8 ounce jig head. This is called the Striker Junior. It's the brand's called River Rock Custom Baits, local to my state. Very nice kind of green pumpkin and chartreuse color there. That's a good pond color around me. And you know, you can keep sizing up, guys. So here's another one that I've talked about multiple times on the channel before. The Bass Pro Shops Speed Shad again, but this is a bigger one. This is a 3-inch size. Very similar color to that last one I showed you. Once again, great for mimicking bluegill in the ponds around me. But that's something I'm going to turn to on those tougher days, guys. Maybe the water's a little bit still, you know, the water is clear, the fish aren't interested in a harder, vibrating, you know, noisy lure. But that's just been an old standby for me for years. So on those tough days, I will switch to just a plain paddle tail, guys. Here's another color, guys. If there's shad in your fishery, wherever you're going, this white color. Very effective for mimicking shad. So the next lure I'm going to talk about, guys, is going to be a type of crankbait, and specifically I'm talking about a lipless crankbait, guys. And this time of year, I tend to follow that downsized trend that I was talking about before, right? Lots of small fish in the water. So I tend to go with a fairly small lipless, at least to start out with. So here's one that it's called the M1. This is the Handing M1 rattling lipless crankbait. Pretty subtle rattle in this thing. Just kind of a sizzling rattle to this bait. And this is I have 3 of these. I did a video on these lures last fall and did pretty good with them. But this is a pretty subtle lipless. Like I said, the rattle's not super loud. I like this color, the purple with the chartreuse belly. I think it's called royal shad a lot of the times in other baits. This is like a 3/8 ounce. I could throw this on a medium light spinning rod, or even a BFS rod if I really needed to. Lighter hooks on it. But this just mimics like a little, that kind of deeper profile. It mimics the little bluegill, a small bluegill really well. And I'm going to throw this on those days when there's a little more commotion going on. There's some wind kicking up like there is today actually, and maybe there's some stain to the water. That's when I'll reach for this, guys. Another model I really like is, in fact, this is probably my favorite lipless of all time, is the Cotton Cordell Super Spot. This is also a downsized one. This is like a 1/4 ounce. I think this one's called Bleeding Shad or something like that. There's the chrome. On a sunny day with that wind, that chrome really catches the light. And this is a little bit louder than that other model. Bigger hooks on it. This is a great model for bank fishing because it's cheap and it doesn't sink super fast. Some lipless out there, including this one, I would say, tend to sink pretty fast. And that can be a problem if you're around a lot of snags. It's easy to get a lipless hung up when you're fishing from the bank around wood, for instance. But this one doesn't sink quite so quickly. It's easy to just kind of slow roll this thing. I just like to feel the vibration of the lure and keep it at that speed, a slow speed, but I can still feel the vibration. And pop it, rip it up a little bit, let it fall, and keep on cranking it. And this has been an especially good lure for bass, for me, largemouth bass particularly. But you can still catch other stuff on this too. I've caught some pickerel with this. So, and once again, guys, all these lures you can downsize. You can find some little 1/8 ounce lipless cranks out there if you're trying to target some smaller fish. So keep that in mind when I say multi-species. I think some people are going to watch this and think, well, you're just talking about bass lures, and that's not really the case at all, guys. Most of these lures are applicable to predatory fish. Anything that's going to eat smaller fish will attack these presentations. Alright, guys, so the next lure category that I'm going to talk about here, and I'm cheating a little bit because I'm really kind of fitting 2 into 1, but I'm going to say some kind of topwater lure is going to be my next choice, guys. And I used to overlook this a lot, throwing a topwater, and it does feel pretty situational for me. So I'm going to say I'm a little less likely to go this route than with the other lures. But there are days here and there, when you can see the fish attacking bait near the surface where you really should be throwing a topwater lure, guys. And there's 2 different categories of topwater, 2 different types of topwater that I prefer this time of year. So one is going to be a buzzbait, guys. And at this point in the year, I will have been throwing a buzzbait pretty much all through the summer as well. So I'm just keeping this tied on from the summer, basically. And this is a great topwater lure for the fall because of that whole covering water thing I've been talking about, you know, when you're just trying to find the fish. This can really help you do that. Even if you're not, because even if you don't catch a fish on this, maybe you're getting a lot of short strikes on your buzzbait. It can help get the fish to reveal themselves. Like if you just get like a short strike on this somewhere and then you never get a fish, you can at least stop, slow down, go with something subsurface, maybe a Finesse bait, you know, a plastic worm, something like that, and you at least know you're in the right place. But this is a great one for covering water, guys. You know, you fish it fast. You're not letting this thing sink. You're just casting, burning it back. Fan casting a lot of the time is what I'm doing with this, guys. You know, if you're on the bank, cast here, cast there, and so forth. Move on 20 yards down the bank, keep doing the same thing. And once again, guys, you need to downsize, especially this time of year. Downsize your presentation when you need to. This is one that I built. Look at that, the wind's catching it. Buzzbait that I built, an inline buzzbait. This is a multi-species lure, guys. This is not just a bass lure. I caught red breast sunfish repeatedly on this earlier in the season. So don't think that you're not going to be catching a variety of fish throwing a buzzbait. You absolutely can in the right conditions when the fish are really attuned to the topwater. Alright, so the second topwater category that I'm going to go with, guys, and this is going to seem a little counterintuitive based on some of the other stuff that I was saying, but once again, it's more situational, more in the right moment. But I will also throw some kind of topwater popper, guys, or a chugger type lure. And this one in particular is pretty interesting. This is a very old model of lure. It's called the Heddon Baby Lucky 13. And you can see it's got that, the hooks are sharp, got that popper type mouth on it, so you can, you know, cast this thing and fish it like you would a popper, you know, slow. And normally for me, I'm going to be trying to cast this around some kind of cover. That's really when I would choose this over the buzzbait, is when there's structure to cast to, whether it's stick-ups in the water, or I know there's like a weed bed about a foot or so under the water. That's when I will go with something like this. And you know, you can this one, it's more of a chug. Like this isn't a great one for fishing or popping along really fast. It makes a deeper bloop sound, sits horizontal. But the other thing about this, guys, that makes it more versatile than a regular popper, look at the line tie. You can see that the line tie is kind of higher in that scoop, you know, that scooped out mouth. What that means is if you've been casting this thing and you have been, you know, chugging to get on the surface, haven't gotten any bites, you can also point your rod tip down and retrieve this thing, and it will actually dive about a foot below the surface, just like a crankbait, a shallow crankbait. It's got a little narrow wiggle to it, kind of a little more erratic than more modern crankbaits, but I caught some fish both on the surface and just winding it in like a crankbait. So that's a cool one to keep in mind if you don't have it in your box, guys. The Heddon Baby Lucky 13. I've got some other models here too. This is one I would throw, say, on a cloudier day. This black one here. This is actually just a Walmart Ozark Trail popper. This one's a little bit better for a faster twitching retrieve. Spits a lot more water instead of making a big sound. It spits a lot more. And once again, guys, don't forget to downsize when you need to. This is a Rebel Teeny Popper. This is like 1/8 ounce. Bluegill love this. Sunfish, bass, pond bass, tear this thing up. So keep those two in mind, guys. Keep the popper out when you've got a lot of targets to cast to, docks, weeds, logs, whatever the case may be. When you won't need to cover water, switch to the buzzbait. The next one here, guys, is going to be a crankbait, and not just any type of crankbait, but specifically a balsa wood crankbait. Now, I'm a fan of these balsa wood baits because I feel like the action is just a little more natural. You know, the fish in the fall, they're pressured now. They've been fished for in the spring, they've been fished for in the summer, and by the fall, many of them have been caught. They're a little more wary, they're a little more picky. They don't necessarily want something that's making a bunch of noise and rattles. And I just feel like a balsa bait has a distinctive movement that a plastic crankbait cannot mimic. So I talked about this one in the spring, and it's still a major player for me in the fall as well, guys. That's this Rapala OG Tiny 4 crankbait. Quite a small, light crankbait. I think it's like a 5/16 ounce. You need like a spinning rod or a lighter bait caster to cast this thing really well, I would say. So make sure you have your gear right when you're throwing this, guys. This is a great one for bass and pike, chain pickerel, that kind of thing. Thin profile, narrow wiggle, guys, more natural, more realistic than like a regular square bill crankbait. And when the fish are pressured, it can make a huge difference just having that more natural movement, more subtle movement. And this is gonna fish well all the way into the winter, guys. When that water is cold, that narrow wiggle is gonna work way, way better than a normal square bill. And this one, you know, around me, most of the time I can't use a square bill because there's too much, there's leaves and stuff on the bottom, algae that gets caught up, so you can't really dig into the bottom. This one, you don't need to dig into the bottom, guys. You're just burning it and pausing, burning it and pausing. And here's another one from Rapala, guys. This is called the Shallow Shad Wrap. This is a smaller lure. This is more like an ultralight, you know, light tackle, thin line lure. But similar principle, guys. It just has a very natural swim to it. It's a little bit, you know, if you reel it fast, it's a little bit more aggressive. If you reel it slow, it's very, very subtle little wobble, guys. No rattles. Very naturalistic type of action there, and I really like this kind of perch pattern for mimicking bluegill in my ponds. Alright guys, so the last one I'm going to talk about is going to be for those really tough days when nothing else seems to be working, and I'm just trying to kind of catch whatever's willing to bite. You know, I'm truly multi-species fishing. You know, what is out there that's going to eat right now because I'm having a tough time? And that's when I often switch to some kind of jig and plastic, but specifically a straight tail soft plastic. So the one I have rigged on here is a Mr. Crappy shad pole, guys. This is the, I think it's called June bug chartreuse. June bug on top, that purple chartreuse belly. 2-inch little plastic, 1/16 ounce jig. I've got that on my ultralight setup. Perfect little pond setup here, guys. Just twitch that thing around. That's how I fish season. You know, make your cast and start twitching, start jigging, shaking. Some people call it jigging. Some people call it strolling, mid-strolling, hover strolling, whatever. I'm not really hovering it. You know, this isn't. You don't have any electronics. You're just kind of reeling and lightly shaking the rod to get that thing to jump around, guys. This is what it's doing in the water. It's hopping and rolling from side to side. You want a 90-degree line tie on your jig head, hopping around. That dual tone color, guys, also really flashes when you're doing that. So I like these dual tone colors over a kind of monochrome color most of the time. And that's just a good type of bait to have multiple colors on hand for mimicking your bait fish, guys. So here's kind of more of a shad pattern one that I've used with success before. Also got this pink one that I've tried a little bit, haven't put in as much time with, but I think in the right conditions it would be pretty nice looking. Got this greenish one with some blue glitter in it, blue flake. And then I also have this super natural one, guys, Bobby Girl and Baby Shad. Specifically, this color is called Live Shad. And this is, I just made a video on this. It is probably the most realistic baitfish imitation that I've used. You know, I was fishing this in a very shallow water creek, and the way that thing flashed, once again doing that little side to side, the way the light caught it, it looked just like a little shiner. Alright guys, so that's going to be it for this video. I hope some of these tips and tricks and these lures are going to help you out this fall. You know, we've got a few more months until winter rolls in and things really start getting tough for the bank angles out there. But I say seize the day, guys. Get out there when you've got the time and get in some more fishing before the year wraps up, and you will find some good success with some of these techniques, guys. It can be tough, it can be slow, you can be doing a lot of casting, not a lot of catching, but on the right day, with the right bait, with the right conditions, you can catch a lot of fish, and you can catch big fish. Thanks again for watching, guys, and please subscribe to the channel. Hopefully I'll see you next time. Peace.